The cast-on row forms the foundation to your knitting. Most of us learned a single method when we learned to knit, and may have used it ever since, perhaps not even being aware that dozens of other methods exist that are designed specifically for stability, flexibility, ribbing, and even decoration. So in this lesson, I'm going to show you a variety of ways to start your project. First, I'll demonstrate a few all-purpose methods, then I'll show you my favorite cast-on for ribbed fabrics, and we'll end up with a couple of provisional cast-ons. Upon learning that I teach a class on cast-ons, one of my friends once asked why she would need to take that class, because she learned a way to cast on when she learned to knit, and she didn't think she needed any other method. Well, I told her that she was right. She could get through life with one cast-on, but she could also get through life with one pair of shoes. But did she really want to? She was hooked. Projects like socks, mittens, the cuffs of sleeves, and hats all need to have a flexible edge that will stretch over heels, hands, and heads. And the bottoms of sweaters and sleeves also need a stable cast-on that won't wear through quickly. So we'll go through a few of these cast-ons and I'll give you tips on when to use them. Remember when you're casting on that you always want to cast on over the biggest circumference of your needle. Don't cast on over the tip, because that will form stitches that are too tight and will be too tight on your needle. And also when you're casting on, you want to avoid pulling the yarn so tight that you'll have trouble inserting the other needle into that stitch on the next row. So let's begin with a few all-purpose cast-ons. These are cast-ons that can be used just about anywhere, and they have slightly different looks, which can be used to your advantage. The first one I'd like to show you is the knitted cast-on. This cast-on makes a stable edge, but also one that has loops that are somewhat open and that are really easy to pick up stitches from later. This cast-on is quite often used for shawls and things that need to have a stretched edge or where an edging is going to be added to it. Okay, and the way you do it is you start with a slip knot on your needle. Okay. And then you take your other needle, and now I knit continental, so I'll be tensioning the yarn in my left hand. It's the same if you knit English style, but you'll just be tensioning the yarn in your right hand. But the motions are all the same. To start, you put your needle through that cast on, get the loop of yarn around it, and then pull it nice and tight and put it on the stitch so that it's twisted. Now, if you keep it nice and loose, you can easily get your needle into that stitch before you tension the yarn, and that will keep you from getting this cast on too tight. So then now you just continue to wrap the yarn, put the stitch on the needle. If you put it in the twisted position, your right needle is in position already to grab the next loop. And you just come along and add stitches. And don't be afraid to pull those stitches really loose and then tension it back down. Now, when you get to the end of the row, the end of your cast on, you'll see that this last stitch is a little bit angled. Pull that off the needle, bring the yarn to the front, put it back on, and then put the yarn to the back, and there you have a completed cast-on row. Okay, next I want to show you the cable cast-on, which is a close cousin to the knitted cast-on. This cast-on forms a nice ropey edge. It's a little thicker and bulkier, but it's a beautiful rounded edge that is very, very stable. And you can use this for anything, sweaters, scarves, mittens, whatever. So you start this cast on very much like the knitted cast on with a slip knot on your needle. And in fact, this cast on requires 2 stitches on your needle, so you have to do a knitted cast on to create that second stitch, unless you've already got stitches on the needle. Both of these cast-ons, the cable and the knitted, are nice ones to use in the middle of a row. Say you're knitting a pair of mittens and you need to take the thumb gusset stitches off and then cast on another stitch over the hole. This makes a nice stable stitch to cast on that then will be easy to pick up into later when you get to the top of the hand. Here's the cable cast on. You start with 2 stitches on your left needle, and then instead of going into that last stitch, you bring your right needle between the 2 stitches, wrap the yarn, and then again put it up on the needle twisted. Now leave that loop nice and big so you can put your needle in and tension down to secure that stitch. Again, bring a nice big stitch. I'm tensioning a little too loosely. Pull till it's snug on both needles, and this will make sure that your stitches are loose enough that you'll be able to knit that first row of knitting. So it's just, again, bring the loop through and on the needle. And just like the knitted cast on, that last stitch looks like it's at an angle. To straighten it out, pull the last stitch off, bring the yarn to the front, and then put it back on the needle, and you bring the yarn to the back, and there you've got your nice solid knitted cast on, and you can see that beautiful ropey edge. Okay, now I'd like to go to a different type of cast on family, and this is the long tail cast on. The long tail cast on is the method I learned first, and it's one I used for about 20 years. I want to show you in a project that I knitted. This little baby sweater has a long tail cast on, and you can see with this cast on it makes kind of a smooth edge against the very bottom on one side. On the reverse side it makes what looks like purl ridges. Most people consider this smooth side the right side, but you don't have to. You can choose to have those purl ridges your right side. I've also used this long tail cast on this sock cuff, and again you can see more clearly the smooth edge up against the knit stitches and against the purl stitches. So it makes this nice border. Now the thing with the long tail cast on is it is very easy to make it too tight, and that's a problem a lot of people have had. Now I'm going to demonstrate how to do this using 2 colors to help prove my point of how you can prevent it from being too tight. In general, when you're going to knit the long tail cast on, you leave a tail that's long enough. And I figure about an inch per stitch to be cast on will make a tail long enough and also leave enough left over that I can use it to sew the side seam of a sweater, which I like to be able to use those cast on tails for that instead of having to join another piece of yarn. If you want to be more exact, leave a little tail for slack and wrap the yarn around your needle 10 times, 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and that tells you that's how much yarn you need for 10 stitches. So that would be the amount for 20, 30, etc. Okay, and then what you do is you make a slip knot right there. Now if you have to cast on 300 stitches, you may really be sweating if you have a long enough tail. In that case, I want to bring in a second ball of yarn. Now in this example, I'm going to use a contrasting color so that you really understand what's happening. So to start, I'll make a slip knot of the 2 balls held together, and that way I have infinite yarn, sort of, on the two halves. Now, the long tail cast on is worked by putting your thumb and forefinger between the two strands. The tail strand typically goes in the front and the ball strand goes in the back. So the ball is over your finger, the tail is over your thumb. Hold on to that slip knot and you mount stitches by coming up through the loop in your thumb, around the strand that's on your finger, and bring that back through the loop. Let go of your thumb and tension to tighten the stitch. Again, it's up, around, back down. Now the problem with this cast on is there's a tendency for the stitches to be mounted too tightly. And if you've ever had a scarf or something that you've knitted where the cast on tail and the bind off tail, or the cast on edge and the bind off edge don't match, that's because your tension on cast ons and bind offs are different. Now what I want you to notice here is that the yarn that was on my thumb is all what's along the base of the needle. The yarn that I had over my finger actually creates the stitches. Now this cast on can be quite tight, and some designers or books will tell you to cast on with two needles held together, and that will make it looser. Well, let's see what happens when I do that. I still am getting the same amount of yarn along the base, but I've just got a sloppy, loose first row of stitches. At least that's what happens when I do it. Where you're going to get the stretch in the cast on is by having more yarn along the bottom, or in this case, the yellow yarn. So what I do to ensure that is I put my thumb on top of the last stitch cast on, then I come up, cast on the next stitch, and I snug it up so that I have 1/4 of an inch between the stitches. Then I move my thumb up, cast on the next stitch, and tighten it, leaving 1/4 of an inch between the stitches. You do that for a few times, and you'll see that now I have nice stretch in that cast on. And that will be a flexible cast on that will work for you better than when you don't have enough space at the end. So now let's look at the Old Norwegian cast on. This is a close cousin to the long tail cast on that I just showed you, in the sense that you need to leave a long tail. The difference is that it produces more of a kind of ropey edge. That this yarn is so elastic, I'm not seeing it as well in this swatch, but here I've used it on a sock cuff, and you get that smooth edge like you would do with a long tail, but you also get these little purl bumps. And the Old Norwegian looks the same pretty much on both sides of the knitting. It doesn't have an obvious right or wrong side row. Here's where I've used it to go into a sock cuff that's in a ribbed pattern, and on this glove I used it right before a purl round, and you can see there's just this nice little texture to the stitch, which in some applications looks really nice. Now let me show you how to do it. And like the long tail, you're going to make a slip knot after leaving a long tail, and put that slip knot on the needle. The ball end goes to the back and the tail end comes to the front. You put your thumb and finger through just like you would for the long tail. Now this one I'm doing all in one color, which the long tail could have been done as well. Now remember, a long tail cast on, you come up through the thumb loop, you grab the finger strand and come back through the thumb. What the Old Norwegian does, which is also called the twisted German cast on, is it creates another loop in that thumb. The thumb loop gets twisted. And the way you do it is you bring your needle under both strands, then over the far strand and bring that to the front. So you see now I have a little bit of a figure 8. Grab the finger yarn through the small part of that figure 8, or the left side. Let go of your thumb and tension. Again, bring your needle under both of the thumb strands, bring the far strand to the front, grab the finger yarn, and then let go of the thumb strand and tension. Again, under both, down the center to the front, grab the finger yarn. Under both, down the center to the front, grab the finger yarn. So you have a nice smooth edge and purl bumps sitting above it on both the right and wrong side row. So essentially every stitch is associated with the purl bump. Now, let's talk about when you want to start out a project with rib. You may have heard of ways to create a ribbed cast-on with some of the general cast-ons I already showed you, such as the long tail and the cable method. But the one I'm going to show you now trumps them all in terms of flexibility. This is the tubular Knit One Purl One cast-on, and it makes a completely invisible edge that works into Knit One Purl One ribbing. When you roll the edge, you just see how those knit stitches continue on from front to back. It has incredible elasticity that feels as though there's actually a piece of elastic in the edge. This is a cast-on I almost always use for socks from the top down that have some ribbing. Okay, so now let me show you how the tubular cast-on is worked. Like the long tail cast-on, you leave a long tail that will be long enough for the number of stitches you're going to cast on, and you make a slip knot. And you have the tail in the front and the working yarn to the back. You hold the yarn like you would for the long tail with your thumb and finger between the two strands. The ball strand is over your finger, the thumb strand is over your thumb. Now what you're going to do is mount stitches in purl and knit orientations. We're going to call the slip knot a knit stitch. So the first stitch we're going to mount will be a purl. So to do that, you come under both strands, over the top of the thumb yarn, and push back so that the finger yarn is in front. And do you see that makes a little purl bump in the front of that stitch? Now for the knit stitch, you come under both yarns, over the finger yarn, and pull it back under the thumb yarn so that the thumb strand just makes the bump in the back. Again, the purl stitch and the knit stitch. The purl stitch uses the thumb yarn, the knit stitch uses the finger yarn. Purl stitch, you come under both, over the top of the thumb yarn and bring it back behind the finger yarn. For the knit stitch, you come around the thumb yarn, pick up the finger yarn and bring it back under the thumb yarn. And when you do it pretty fast, it looks like fun. Now, when you do this cast on, you want to be sure to end with a purl bump or a purl stitch. And then you're going to twist the two yarns around each other, and then you're going to be ready to turn for your first row. Now, remember, we mounted that last stitch as a purl stitch when we were on the other side. Now that I look at it from this side, I see a knit stitch. There's a smooth knit stitch, and there's the purl stitch with the bump, smooth knit, purl stitch with the bump. So that'll be alternated all the way down. For the first 2 to 4 rows of knitting, you want to basically knit double knitting. And what that means is you're going to knit what looks like a knit stitch, and if it looks like a purl stitch, You bring the yarn to the front and you simply slip it purlwise. Knit the knits and slip the purls with the yarn in front. Knit the knit, slip the purl, 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 knit the knit, and slip that slip knot, which acts as a purl on this side of the row. Now the next row, we turn, and this time we're going to knit the knits and slip the purls, but this time what was a knit is what was slipped on the previous row because it was a purl stitch on the other side. So again, I knit the knit and I slip the purl and I knit the knit and I slip the purl, knit the knit, slip the purl, knit the knit, slip the purl, knit, slip, knit, slip, knit, and slip. And after you have 2 rows done, you can see how that edge just wraps around and there's no truncation like there are with other cast-ons. Now you can do 2 more rows of the double knitting, which when you're knitting back and forth is just 2 more rows of knit the knit, slip what looks like a purl while holding the yarn in front. If you're knitting in rounds, you'd have to alternate knit the knit, slip the purl, and then purl the purl and slip the knits. So now, after you've done 2 to 4 rows of your ribbing, you're going to just go into the regular rib. You knit all the knits and purl all the purls. And let me get a couple rows of this done, and you will really be able to see that beautiful edge and the amazing stretch that it has. Okay, now take a look at that beautiful rounded edge where the stitches just seem to be consistent and continuous from one side to the other. And look at that beautiful stretch. Okay, now let's look at a couple provisional cast-ons, because there will be times when you want a cast-on edge that's not really the end. I used a provisional cast-on on this sweater where I wanted to knit the body from the bottom up, but I wanted to come back later and put this lace edging around the hem so that the bind-off edge of the lace would make these pretty scallops. There are other times when you'd want to use a provisional cast-on. For instance, if you want to have both tails of a scarf both be knitted in the same direction, either both from the neck down, so that you have a directional pattern that'll look the same on both sides. So let's take a look at how we do the provisional cast-on. The first one I want to show you is called the crochet chain provisional cast-on. And this begins with a crochet chain that's worked in a contrasting yarn. It's best to use a very smooth yarn. Cotton or silk are good because then you don't get the fibers all mucking up with each other. You make a chain and then you pick up the chain and you knit your swatch. When you're all done, you can pull out the chain. You just rip it out like you would one of those big bags of dog food. We start this with a crochet chain. And to make a crochet chain, you start with a slip knot. And then you're going to make a chain that is 4 stitches longer than the number of stitches you need to cast on. So to crochet, you bring your loop, you bring your hook, catch the yarn, and bring it through the loop that was on the hook. Again, catch the yarn and bring it through the loop that was on the hook. You do that till you have at least 4 stitches more than you need to cast on. So again, you grab the working yarn with your hook and bring it through the chain or the loop that's on the hook. And once you get the number of stitches you need, you're going to cut the yarn and you're going to pull that tail through to secure the chain. But before you go any further, tie an overhand knot in that piece. because that is going to be the side you'll unzip from later. Now, you have your crochet chain. On one side, you just have the simple V's of the crochet chain, and on the back side, you see a little loop sticking out of each of those chains. Whoops, we want to use a knitting needle like right there and right there. These are the loops that you're going to pick up to create your cast on. So let me show you. You'll leave 2 stitches, not 2 chains, not picked up, and you start in the 3rd one, and you just wrap the yarn around the hook, or the needle now, and pull through a stitch. Then you come through this next. It's really the middle strand of those 3 strands that form the stitch. Bring your needle through and hook the yarn. If you knit English style, you're going to tension the yarn with your right hand, but you'll basically be making the stitches the same way. You'll work until you have the number of stitches on your needle that you need to cast on, and your crochet chain then just hangs to the bottom. Now you'll start knitting, and the first row can be a knit or a purl, and you'll work back and forth for however long you want. Let me knit a couple rows for us. I'll start with a knit row, and this is a very tiny piece, but I think you'll get the point. Knit a row and purl a row, and then you'll have a little foundation of your knitting. And now you see I've got a nice piece of stockinette starting out of this crochet chain. Now, when it comes time that you want to knit in the opposite direction, you go back to your crochet chain, you find the piece that has the knot on it. And that's the part that you can pull and reveal those stitches, which then you can place on a needle and knit in the opposite direction. Okay, now let's take a look at the twisty wrap cast on method, which mounts your cast on stitches on a piece of waste yarn. This is a little faster than the crochet chain, but it also can be a little trickier. Let me show you how we do that. We start with your working yarn, and you start with whatever your contrasting yarn is going to be. And again, it's really good if that contrasting yarn is a smooth cotton yarn or something that will pull out easily. If you use wool, there's a chance that the fibers on the wool will catch, and you might even get colors get stuck in them. Like if you're using a white waste yarn with a black wool sweater, you'll get little fuzz balls. Okay, so I'm going to make a slip knot of the waste yarn and the working yarn and put it on my needle. Now the way this works is you're going to grab, you put the waste yarn over your thumb and the working yarn over your finger. You're going to scoop the yarn, and then you're going to twist your hand and scoop the yarn again. Twist, scoop, twist, scoop, twist, scoop. So essentially you're scooping the yarn from above the waste yarn, and then you're scooping the yarn from below the waste yarn. So your right hand is always just scooping the yarn the same way, and your left hand is flipping back between looking at your palm and looking at the back of your hand. When you're done, wrap the waste yarn around the last stitch, and then I usually will cut the waste yarn and tie all of the ends together in an overhand knot so that now that waste yarn can't slip out. turn the work, and you're ready to start knitting. And notice how the waste yarn forms this little zigzaggy pattern along the bottom of the needle. The waste yarn is never over the top of the needle. If you get the waste yarn on top of the needle, you've done something wrong and you need to rip out and do it again. So before you start knitting, just take a look to make sure only your working yarn is on the needle. Then you can go ahead and just start knitting in whatever stitch pattern you want to be knitting in. I'm doing just good old stockinette. And the stitches feel a little loose. That's okay, because what you've got is the other half of the stitch that will become a stitch on the other side. Now when you get to the slip knot, you can either work just the working yarn part of it, or what I typically do is just drop it off altogether. But that's going to lose a stitch. So if you do that, you need to remember not to count the slip knot when you're counting the stitches you've cast on. And you just continue knitting back and forth, or round and round, depending on how you're doing it, on those live stitches. And then when you're done and you want to knit in the other direction, you can rip out, cut your yarn, and pull out that waste yarn. Now in this case, I still have my little, I put my slip knot on a little pin so you could see it. And that's the slip knot that I had dropped off the needle at the end of the first row. And you should be able to just pull that apart and be done with your waste yarn altogether. I've got it caught in another knot. And there you go, and you're ready to knit in the other direction. Now I encourage you to make swatches of each of the cast-ons I've showed you so that you have them for reference and you'll remember what they look like, and next time you're ready to start a project, you can maybe choose a cast-on that's going to suit your needs a little better. I keep all of my cast-ons and bind-off samples in plastic sleeves in a notebook for easy reference. I just want to remind you that these are the cast-ons that I use most often. But if you want more options, check out Aurora Cisneros' class, 40 Ways to Cast On and Bind Off. Having a choice of cast-ons and knowing what they will look like and how they will function will help you decide what to use for your next project and will take you to the next level of knitter. Next up, I'll show you my favorite options for increases and decreases, whether you need to shape a garment or if you're working a lace pattern.